Franchise Secrets, Eric Von Horn.
If you're not a part of the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. I cannot believe how valuable this group turned out to be. When someone asks a question, the feedback is honest, authentic, very helpful, and it's from multiple perspectives. If you're not sure that you're getting the most accurate information about franchising, then check out the largest, most helpful Facebook group in all of franchising. Whether you're a Z, a Zor, a buyer, or investor, join our free Facebook group at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. You're going to love this episode with Joe Attia. Joe's a friend of mine. He's a multi-brand franchisee. He started out with Orange Theory Fitness. And this was coming from a background with a Ph.D. in economics, MBA, consulting background, turned franchisee. And he says he's an anti-franchising guy, but he's been a franchisee with Orange Theory, successful exit. And most recently, he's been growing large areas with KidStrong, which a lot of Orange Theory franchisees have gone into the KidStrong brand. So we talked about all kinds of things, about things not going as planned. We dove into what does he think about with his background in economics and entrepreneurship? How does that play into his decision-making today? Talking about de-risking franchise deals that he's buying into. We talked about his experience with Orange Theory Fitness. Would his experience at KidStrong be different? His success at KidStrong be different if he didn't have a successful Orange Theory experience? We talked about dealing with franchisee-franchisor relationships. Are the goals aligned? Are they not? How do you improve things to benefit both the brand and the franchisee? So we got into all kinds of stuff. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Joe Attia. Joe, I'm glad you said yes to this interview. It's fun doing this with friends. We started out as strangers and then we've become friends. And I'm really looking forward to this. I think with your background, PhD, MBA, consulting, entrepreneur, jumped into a brand that was, I would say, more mature, and then had an amazing exit on that brand, then went into a new brand, which I would say is emerging. And there's a ton of discussion I want to have around all of that. But why don't you dive a little bit into your background to give the audience context for this interview?
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here and talk to Eric. I think we've really, we have become friends over the last few years. And I think that's actually an interesting aspect that is probably unique to someone like you. You take your business relationships and make friendships out of them. And I think that's authentic. Whereas a lot of people take friendships and make business relationships out of them and they lose the friendships. But I enjoy talking to you all the time. You've been very helpful.
Dude, I never thought about that. I've never had that framed that way. And it's absolutely true as I think about a lot of who my friends are today. And it's really cool.
Well, it's an interesting balance before we even get into my background to be able to do that, because same thing. I have relationships with people and I think that they're friends. And I've learned over the years that I've got to be very careful with that, because that is not the way a lot of people see the world. And I've been burned by that in situations. And it's actually cool to be hanging out with people that are like that. And that's when we were doing the big shindig last summer. I think that's something that really came out of it. And I think that's something that you and Justin really do emit. And it makes it a much more interesting group to be a part of, because it makes it more real and safer with that mindset being pushed out. But going back to your question, my background, grew up in an interesting place in Detroit, son of two immigrants that moved from Egypt and had a different perspective on the world. And my father was an entrepreneur. He built his own business, and just watching him struggle through the years and with the recessions and everything, and then figuring out where I'm going to go in life as a first generation American, and watching the differences between me, my brother, and my sister were always really interesting. But I ended up going to the University of Virginia and getting a PhD in economics. When I got that, I went into economic consulting for a while, really enjoyed it, but timing was really interesting when I got that Ph.D. I graduated in a recession with that, just like I did when I was an undergraduate in 92, also graduated into a recession. So those are always interesting times. Our consulting practice that I was working on, the specific practice that I was in was slowing down. And my brother convinced me to go into business with him. He had taken over our family business. He's an architect. So we went into construction. He convinced me to move back, and we decided that we would work together. Built that business pretty quickly, and we're doing really well for quite a few years there. And then the recession started to hit. We were in Michigan, and it was interesting because most people in the country, the recession really hit around 2008. But Michigan, Florida, and Arizona, things had really turned around in 2006. And so we were in an interesting position watching a highly leveraged business model change and watching prices actually go down. And I'll never forget, we were having a conversation with our dad, trying to get some guidance from him about what was going on. And we were explaining to him how, like, we built a house and we were building another house next to it. How do you handle it when the house that you build next, the price is less than the first one? And he couldn't understand the question because he's never seen that in his life. Even in the 80s, that didn't happen. And we were in this real challenging spot. We had to figure out how to do some things. And I had to figure out personally, how to rebrand myself. PhD economist, I'd now worked in construction and real estate development for 6 years. No one was hiring in that business model in that area. None of the big boys were. You couldn't survive on a little level. So that's when I went and decided to get my MBA at Michigan. Got that in a couple of years, and then I ended up going into management consulting, which was a very interesting dark spot professionally. It was a 21st century factory job is the way I looked at it. And I didn't really improve professionally. I didn't pick up a lot of skills. And as I was trying to look for industry jobs and trying to get out of that, and I was also traveling a lot, which was really interesting, having very young kids. And you probably get something like this, Eric, but I think my son was probably 4 years old. And one Sunday night, my son looks at me and goes, "Dad, is tomorrow Monday?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "That means today's Sunday." He's like, "I don't like Sunday nights." I go, "Why?" He goes, "That means tomorrow's Monday and you're going to be traveling. I don't like it when you travel because I'm gone all week." And it was really eye-opening that, this is the point where he was starting to get the idea of time and how it fit. So as we were looking for changes, I realized, and I was looking for opportunities, I was in an interesting position professionally. I really didn't think I was really that hireable. I went through a lot of rounds of interviews with some really interesting companies. Nothing really closed out. It was a real struggle. And then we stumbled onto Orange Theory Fitness. My sister had joined as a member in Chicago when they'd opened there. My wife had talked to her about it. After she saw her, she decided she wanted to try it. So my wife pulled us aside one Thursday night and said, "Let's go check out the Boston location. They just opened a month ago. And this is in the summer of 2014. My wife sets up an intro class for the next morning. She calls me up afterwards and where'd it go? She goes, "I'm so pissed off I joined."
Well, your mic cut out there. We'll come back. Your mic cut out for some reason.
Sorry. Is that a good thing or bad thing? You're so pissed off you joined? She's like, "Yeah, I'm so pissed off I joined." I go, "What does that mean?" She goes, "I've been working out 5 days a week all summer, and I'm not even close to being in shape. That class kicked my ass. I signed. I'm so pissed off I joined, and we're opening this in Natick." I'm like, "Okay, great." And again, she said this to me, and I was like, "Whatever." I already looked at a bunch of franchises, and I'm not a fan of franchises. And I was like, "Oh, whatever. Just let her do what she's going to do." Well, she would go and take her classes in the morning, and she'd call Florida and say, "Hey, I want a franchise." Hang up, go to work, come back, do the same thing after her next class. After 4 or 6 weeks of this, they finally gave up. And they're like, "Fine, you can have a franchise." Calls me up that day and said, "Hey, they said we can have a franchise." All right, I guess I'm going to be a franchise owner. I guess I'm opening Orange Theory Fitness. And December 2016, I went down for my franchise training. December 2014 went down for my franchise training and dove in and had no idea what I was getting into. Didn't know why I was getting into it for the right reason, besides the fact that I built a little spreadsheet model. I'm like, "Oh, I can get my money back in a few years. That's not bad." I can do that. And it turned out to work. I was very lucky in what we got into. But also I saw the good and the bad of franchise when I got in there. It was a unicorn of a franchise, but there were also, like every business model that we talk about all the time, there are challenges that we all face.
I think we should talk about some of that because like you said, you got into a unicorn, but there's still challenges within that. And you are the anti-franchise guy, but you had a very successful exit with Orange Theory. And then you doubled down and are growing KidStrong, but you're the anti-franchise guy. So we'll definitely get into that. I have a question going back to being the PhD in economics. Has any of what you learned back then helped you as you've gone through different recessions and we're right now in an inflationary period? Has school helped you? Any of that helped you? I think that's a fantastic degree. Like if I was to go back, I would get an economics degree versus a business management degree. Because I think I just like that. I loved economics. Was one of my favorite classes in college. So like, has any of that helped you?
Yes, 100%. I purely think as an economist, it's framed the way I look at the world and understand things and see things. And it challenges the people around me because as an economist, you're trained to see things differently than the way people typically see things on the surface. So I'm always applying it. And, there are a couple concepts that just are there embedded in economics. But one of the things that drives everybody around me crazy, I'm always like, well, what's the value driver? What are you doing to create value? It goes so far as I was having a conversation with my team this week at KidStrong. We require parents to be present for classes. And we had one parent that wasn't there. She went for a jog. So the team was like, well, everyone's looking at her and she shouldn't be doing this. I'm like, you're right. She shouldn't be doing that. But we can't just tell her she needs to be there. We need to make it valuable for her to be there. It's on us to generate that value. And that's my economics training coming through in that conversation with them. And that's why I always look at things as how can we create value? I think the ironic thing about getting a PhD in economics is, it took me 6 years to get my PhD after 4 years of undergraduate. But everything I ever needed to learn about economics, I learned in my first economics course. It just took me that 10 years to actually understand it.
So you're saying I learned a lot, but I don't understand anything. I get it, man.
You just don't know it until you get into a lot of the analysis and you get deeper into it and it starts to come out in your conversations in life.
So what's the difference between an economist and an entrepreneur? Like where's there a rub? Where's there like challenging points? Because you're both.
Yeah, I am both. An entrepreneur is someone who's willing to take those risks and manage the uncertainty and be persistent in trying to make changes, right? Economics is just, the concept is the study of how we make choices under constrained resources, how we allocate our resources. But as an entrepreneur, it's the risk taking that's a difference, and being able to take the time to be able to work through those risks, mitigate them, and hopefully come out the other side, I think is a big difference. Economics, we analyze risks as economists, but most economists don't take risks, right? That's why most economists are academics. It's about as safe as you can get.
So I had Justin and I just finished a podcast, and it released quite a while ago by the time this one releases, and we had a fun time that released in late July, talking about like the CPI just came out, and I think it's at 9.1%. And things are very interesting right now. Some people think inflation is going to keep increasing. We're going to go into recession. We're not going into recession. Smart people have strong opinions on both sides of things. Where do you see things going? Or how do you look at it? Whether it's the frame that you look at it through, or do you have the crystal ball that is Joe's crystal economic entrepreneurial ball?
I don't claim to have a crystal ball. I think as a good economist, I'm always saying I don't know what's going on. I can tell you what I think is going on, but I don't know where it's going to go. And I think this is one of the challenges that we always face, because we're talking to economists and financiers and professionals and entrepreneurs that have seen all these different things. And the only way you really get a soundbite is you've got to really sound confident and give a good story. but you don't know when it's going to happen. For instance, I believe that we were going to hit huge amounts of inflation back in 2010, 2011, because of all the bank funding that came out. When you look at the Federal Reserve balances with the banks and they injected all that money into the banks, you had spikes that had never been seen by orders of magnitude that were just enormous. And it was just common sense. This has got to be inflationary. Well, we had been through the lowest inflationary time period that we've ever seen over the last 10 years, which nobody really understood. Which comes back to 2 years ago when we were sitting around in May 2020, they pumped all this money out to all these people through the PPP funding and all this help to families, and we shut everything down. I looked at my wife, I go, this can't end good. When you shut everything down, we're going to run out of stuff and everyone's got money. This just can't turn out to be good. That might be the first time I've ever said anything that was right, but it also took 1.5 years for me to be right on that. Like I expected to happen a lot sooner on these things. And it's how is it all going to play out? Right now, I would expect, and I would think that we're still going to have high inflationary time period for a while because you're still feeding all that cash through the system. And at the end of the day, I believe what Milton Friedman said, inflationary is everywhere and always a monetary phenomenon. It is just how much money is out there. Prices increasing can be from supply and demand, and that's not the same thing as inflation. Inflation is the fact that money is less valuable. And we have both things happening right now. You have a lot more money out there, so money is less valuable. We did that around the world. Europe funded everybody. They did all the support. We did it here in America, and we've continued to do it. And our government continues to want to do it. But at the same time, you had a complete restriction of the supply of goods throughout the world when we shut everything down. You put those things together of price increases plus inflation, you get what we're going through right now. It's a very challenging time. I'm seeing this happen, watching it happen in my business. What I thought we were stable from 6 months ago in terms of our plan has been sort of thrown out, has been thrown out the window in sort of planning. And I've got to reformulate because watching our construction costs spike up 30 to 50% in 6 months really changes your business model. To say the least.
Well, one of the things that you said is there's really smart people out there that if they say, this is what I think, I don't know, this is what I think. I tend to listen to people that kind of start out with, this is what I think is going to happen. I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know, but here's some probabilities of, I think this might happen. This is a high chance, low chance, whatever. I tend to listen to people like that more than I do those that are saying this is what's going to happen. So it sounds like you're kind of similar to that. And because there's a lot of sensationalism out there and a lot of people like to be right. And, clock's right twice a day. Yeah.
And honestly, when people say things, we don't go back and back test everything and say, hey, this person said something, they were right, they were wrong at this time. We only remember the times they were right. And if you're on enough times and you say it, you could be that broken clock and you'll get there. And it's not relevant. And it's a really hard thing to just think about the processes. And that's one of the things I got out of my economics training, at least. It's and I've gotten this from other things that have tied into it, but you got to be careful with the randomness in the world, thinking it's smart. There's a lot of luck and a lot of randomness in the world. We've got to follow good processes in order to be successful eventually. And that's what it comes down to. It's just trying to see the inputs and try to figure out, which is why I have a perspective on even when I was looking for franchises, what I was looking for in terms of, the triggers and things that I thought would bring value to me.
So I wanted to talk about those things that you were looking for. For that, who do you follow? What do you like to read? Who do you follow from an entrepreneurship to economics to try to understand, to be able to make better decisions as an entrepreneur? Who do you follow? Ray Dalio? Do you like Ray Dalio?
I don't follow Ray too much. I read some of his stuff. The big one really for me at this point, especially given the time that I'm in, is John Warrillow. I read his book and I listen to his podcast a lot because I'm thinking about, how you build these businesses and where they go on exits, and having been there and talked to other people who've gone through exits. You've actually been a great resource because of the people you've talked to in your franchising background. And then from an economist standpoint, I try to keep it a bit diversified and not necessarily listen to specific economics topics, but more that people traditionally think of. But I think of more economic, the concepts. So one thing I listen to on a weekly basis, someone I've been listening to forever, is a podcast called Econ Talk. And he won't just talk about economics, but he talks about a lot of different subjects that he brings up with different authors or different concepts. And then sometimes it'll be a specific economic conversation that I'll have around certain topics and thinking. One person that really influenced me over the last 10 years into sort of my thinking too was Nassim Taleb. Mm-hmm. He's the one that came up with the idea of the black swan back in the early 2000s. It became very prominent with the recession, but his thinking of just is very different, and it helps me think about where I'm going.
So here's the deal with the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. It's full of a bunch of successful franchisees across many different industries, many different brands, and you get to be a part of that. Now, if you've had any level of success in franchising, you've probably been around top performing Z's in your current brand. So think about that. And if you could do that with 40 plus different brands, industries, franchisees, that's the value in the mastermind. I bring in some of the best speakers in the world. We talk about some topics that will never be talked about anywhere else. So if you're interested in being a part of a group like that, check out franchisetribe.com. So if you're listening to this and these are some people to follow, some names that you've heard, dive into their world, follow them on Twitter, see if they've been on different podcasts, and not that you might not be learning tactics or, specific things like that, but it's a way of thinking. If you listen to some of these people and learn from them, they have a different way of thinking than you might. And so, take that into consideration when you're starting to learn from some of these folks. And like John Warlow, John's been on the podcast. I've been on his podcast when I talked about my exit at Sola. Great guy. And I think we're trying to get him into the mastermind so we can, and it came from you. I think you're the one that said that in one of the sessions. And then I'm like, hey, Caleb, let's see if John can come in. So maybe we'll have another podcast mastermind session with John. So let's talk about, let's go back to Orange Theory. That's a franchise that there's a couple ways to look at it. You and I was people in the mastermind, friends of ours that have done very well. Most people have done very well in Orange Theory. They were early on. They were like 2 or 3s into it. I'm thinking about Chris Elmore. Chris was a couple of years into it. He just posted this in the Facebook group that it was still an early young brand then. And it had its challenges and it wasn't as strong back then that it is today or when you became a franchise. So I think we were talking earlier about you didn't realize how strong that system was or didn't give enough credit to it or didn't give enough weight to how mature it was early on. So I'm putting words in your mouth right now. So why don't you describe that in your words?
Well, what I saw as being valuable at Orange Theory was, interestingly, one of the first things that I saw and I discovered was valuable that the early on Orange Theory franchisees apparently didn't like when it got implemented was the programming, the template design by Orange Theory. I didn't know this, but I don't think they implemented template design until around 150 open units, I think it was. Wow. Before that, each coach just designed their own workouts and it was based around their concept. And then they started centralizing that. When I got into it, I'm like, because I just work out on my own. I've always worked out on my own. I've designed my own workouts, but somebody's going to give it to me. That's awesome. And to me, that was incredibly valuable. And that's one of the aspects that I was looking for. And it wasn't like, and what I learned also was talking to another franchisee at one point was I wasn't looking for specifically template design. He used the word programming. And that's what I'm always looking for, programming. If you're in a restaurant, it's the menu that they give you. How often does it change? That's your programming. At Orange Theory, it was our template design that was very valuable. Another part that everybody's jumping onto, of course, is the recurring revenue business model, which is just sort of a no-brainer now that everybody's doing. But even early on in Orange Theory, I mean, you go into a lot of fitness businesses. Now they're doing recurring memberships, but they always sold packages. Let's get $200 up front and then, give someone, 10 visits and then we'll go from there. Versus, just collecting $120 a month forever. Then the thing that I think was interesting about Orange Theory that to me is valuable, and this is the debate that I go through with everybody, it's the network of value. The fact that we had members at our studios, and this wasn't true when I first got in there because we only had 200 open studios when I launched in April 2015. But the more studios that opened, the more relevant it became. The fact that one of my members could go to another studio and it was transparent to them, that network effect, which is an economics concept, right? This is why Twitter and Facebook have gotten so big. It's because you have a network effect. And at Orange Theory, we had that network effect in the sense that I had my first studio. I lost money to the network every time one of my members visited another member. And in fact, I was losing money on a weekly basis because the way they did it was just how many visits come to your studio from the network, how many of your members go someplace else. They just debit you or credit you based on what that delta is. So I'd always have more members visit other studios and people coming to me because we weren't a vacation place. But what I learned was I might be losing money on the face every week and reducing my total revenue because I had more members visiting other places. But I was making a lot more money and more profitable because I have a bigger member base because people would keep their memberships because I'm gone for 2 weeks. I'm not going to cancel my membership. I'll just visit someplace else. And that had a lot of value to me. And I learned this because if I had actually understood anything about fitness, there's no way I would have gotten an Orange Theory when I did it. When they told us the average studio was 720 members, that's a stupid number when you look at boutique fitness. Yep. It doesn't exist. I would have thought they were lying. I mean, we've got one of the best CrossFits in the world here in Natick, Ben Bergeron, who trains a bunch of the top 10 CrossFitters in the world. I think at their time, they were like 400 or 500 members was big. And that's one of the biggest boxes, and they were very successful. And here you are telling me like the average Orange Theory is going to have 700 members. I wouldn't have thought that was true. But I think without really knowing what I was getting into, one of the reasons we were able to be that big was because you could join with us. You go to New York, you go to Orange Theory. You go anywhere and you go to Orange Theory. And then when people were visiting, your friends could come. And if you're a member, you take your friend with you into Orange Theory if they're a member someplace else. And when you combine that with the universal template design, it was actually a really powerful network because we'd work out here and we'd compare our workouts to somebody in Washington or New Zealand or wherever in the world. It was sort of cool. So the recurring revenue business model, programming, I wanted some sort of network effect. And a lot of times you get to the point eventually where the brand becomes your network effect. So McDonald's is successful because, I don't go to McDonald's because there's a McDonald's in my town. I go to McDonald's because when I travel, I know what I'm going to get. And there's the true value in the brand. Whereas Orange Theory, it is the network effect, which is the real value there with the programming and a quality thing. And then I also wanted something that had territorial rights, a protected area. This is where I struggled with Orange Theory is they ran under an area representative model, and every area was sort of dictated. It was dictated by their area rep and how they were going to roll everything out.
You don't like it unless you are an area rep, and then you love it.
Exactly. And it became the Hunger Games. You're fighting for your next territory or for your next franchise site. Your only protection is in your protected territory. And someone can come pop, and they plopped 2.9 miles from my first studio, and it was really a negative impact. So I wanted to have a larger protected territory, which was one of the things I looked for. And those are the things that I thought are valuable in terms of franchising is how do I protect myself? How do I make sure my money's there and coming regularly? How much thinking can you do on my behalf? And then how do I get a network effect? And that network effect is, I think, one of the real challenges that you're going to see in any brand. I think that if I find this again, I'm jumping on it.
Do you think you can find it again? Because you got in late to Orange Theory, but you still got in. Is it like, how challenging is it what's the risk of thinking you find it and then it not happening?
Oh, that risk is huge. That risk is huge because one of the things that you'll see, so I got in late to the Orange Theory, but not really that late. I was a 400th license sold, 200th studio open.
So it's not that late.
It wasn't
Where
that
are they
late.
today? 200
now
open.
Worldwide, I think because of the recession, because of the pandemic and everything, they think they peaked down around 12 or 1300 worldwide. They were on 1100 domestic. I don't know what's shut down domestically. I'm not that in tune, but they're still probably in that 1400 unit range in the world. And now they're opening things up. But I wasn't early to the party, and everybody thought I was crazy getting into fitness, of course, too, because fitness is so trendy. But I still think, it's a great concept, and they've done some great work at that.
So you sold at the right time. Like you had your crystal ball out and you knew exactly when to sell. When did it close? When did your sale close? How many did you have? How many, and when did it close?
I sold in December 2019. So right, perfectly timed. I partnered up with 2 other franchisees. We sold 6 units together in a license, and incredibly lucky. Because if I had been smart, I would have kept it, and I would have had actually more Orange Theories in my portfolio, and I would have never sold. So definitely, thank God, I just got super lucky, because the smart play didn't work out for me. My strategy completely failed, which is why I sold. And crystal ball. Yeah, crystal ball. I saw it coming.
The lucky crystal ball. But I think that's a good point. I've sold early. I sold Sola before I wanted to sell Sola. It worked out. It worked out really well. I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. It wasn't timed like yours, but it certainly happened. And it was in California, which was even more of a challenge. But then even after that, things came back and that brand started to thrive, because the people that were working at other salons needed space, and they needed that 100 square feet or 200 square feet. And Solo was a perfect model. But when that started happening, you didn't know how it was going to turn out if we weren't able to get into our locations, and it would have been horrible, but it ended up working out really well, at least in, those studios that we had. We sold, so it didn't matter, but I've tended to sell sooner than what I thought was the peak. And for the most part, I've been happy with that. So when you sold, what was the real driving reason for you to sell? Like, why did you didn't know the pandemic was coming. Why did you sell?
I didn't have a future for my staff. With only 2 units, I didn't have a career path for anyone. And I knew I was going to go through the critical positions of managers and head coaches on a regular basis. And in that business model, in that boutique model, whenever you lose your manager, your head coach, it puts a lot of strain on the level above that. With only 2 units, that's on me. And with a young family, and with a business that was basically open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we opened 5 o'clock in the morning for our classes, didn't shut down till 9 o'clock at night, classes throughout the day. At the wrong times, it was a lot of strain on me, and I didn't have that path. I wanted to have 4 units so I could have another layer of career path. That was what drove it for me.
So you could have had 4 units. You could have put like a district operational manager, COO type person, where everything went through them.
Yeah, and then if they leave, I bring up one of my managers, and if one of my managers leaves, they step down, they fill that role, and then bring up an assistant manager or something like that, and you've got a buffer there. And now I've got a platform that would work. That was what I really wanted to get. I wanted to get an island of locations, a pod of locations, and be able to share resources like that.
So what I've discovered about myself, whenever I'm leaving one franchise system, I'm looking for the thing that I didn't have in the past system in the new system. And yes. I think that was one of the things for you too. So what are some of those things that you were looking for in the new system that you couldn't have in Orange Theory?
Well, that's the big part, is territory. I wanted multiple units so I could get myself organized. And that's actually what we're trying to do, is we're basically trying to organize in pods of units so that we can share resources against it. Now I've got a career path for people, show them where they're going to go. And we're very early on in KidStrong, and I don't think my team really gets that yet, but I've got really great operating partners in my locations, and they're helping, buffering me, and they're really at that point in their lives where they can really be there on a day-to-day basis. But once we get, and we're pretty close to where the team's going to see that there's a progression. They can go from being a coach to a head coach to a regional coach, and that's a good 6-8 year timeline for somebody, and they can have a good living on that. That'd be great. And the same thing can happen on the director side, or even we get enough units, we're going to need back office operations, shared services. that is one of the big things that I was looking for outside of the underlying mechanics I thought were valuable to in order to pay a royalty, to pay the franchise fee. That's the thing, one of the things I really looked for in to move forward with the franchise is that territory. I wasn't going to do it unless I had a bunch of units that I could basically count on my team and lean on them to grow with me.
I had a conversation over the weekend or on Monday. I can't remember what it was. And it prompted because
is there a difference for you between weekends and Monday?
No
Eric?
difference.
That's what I'd like to know.
No difference. There's no difference. I just like, I don't know if it was on a Sunday or a Monday. I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, and we were talking about brands, and he's a consultant. And he was like, gosh, we were just talking open and honestly about some things and about emerging brands versus established brands. And I told him, I'm like, if I ever got back into consulting, one of the things, and I'm not going to, by the way, there's zero plans to do it. But if I ended up doing that, I would probably tend to sell or recommend more existing brands, and especially to people who have never been an entrepreneur before. And that prompted a post to me that I did in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, basically saying, hey, what's the difference between, an emerging brand and an established brand? And I used Orange Theory, I used Crumble, I used a number of different brands as an example. At one point, they were emerging. When Chris Elmore bought Orange Theory and people before him, it was still emerging. When you bought, there was 200 open units, and so it's a very different brand, different risk profile, and now I think one of the bigger things with that is if you're buying into an emerging brand, your likelihood for success, if you've been a franchisee or if you've been a business owner, an entrepreneur before, you're de-risked. That's de-risking that franchise. So what would you say about that? Because you are in an emerging brand right now with entrepreneurial experience.
Well, you brought up the key word there. You de-risked it. And one of the things that creates value is risk. So if I get in when it's safer, there's a less opportunity to have more upside. So what's important for you at the time of your life is something that's very important for people to realize. If you want to have the opportunity to have a bigger exit or make more money, it's got to be riskier, and you've got to be comfortable with that. You can make good money in established businesses, but when you take that risk out, it's not going to be predictably as profitable. And I got to be careful saying that, right? Because when you have more risk, it's not predictably more profitable, but you have an average profit, which is higher, but there's a lot more challenge to get to it. So I think answering that question really depends on what somebody wants. And also, what are you willing to put up with, right? I wouldn't have had, like today, if you try to get into KidStrong, I don't have the opportunity that I had 2 years ago when I found them to get into it, because it's less risky for people to get in, and it's now getting established. When I do get in, everybody else will have paved the road for me, so it should be easier to open a unit because I've learned more in their processes. But it's also harder to get a license. Like Orange Theory, same thing. So if you go for that security blanket, it's not necessarily easier. Getting through and getting started is more challenging. Once you do get started, I think it's easier, but it also changes the roadmap.
So you have 2 locations open. Go back to the Joe as a new Orange Theory franchisee. Would you have been as successful as you are today with KidStrong without the OTF experience?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I learned so much. I mean, I go back to, remember, I was just saying, when I went into management consulting, that was my professional black hole. I didn't learn anything at that time. When I was a real estate developer and partnering with my brother, I learned a ton about business and relationships and working. When I became an Orange Theory franchisee, I learned so much more about business because you're in a retail business, you're facing a couple hundred customers a day, being in the franchise, hiring people on a daily basis. I learned so much. It is giving me such a better perspective on how to see what's going on inside of our business. And when I talk to my team today, I mean, it's funny because I've got gray in my beard, and like now that we do all these video calls, we can see what we look like all the time. And I see that I've always got this look on my face with the gray in my beard. But I joke around, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm the old guy that's telling you guys these stories, but these stories are valuable. And, for instance, in KidStrong, we were open 2 weeks, and KidStrong is it's a parent-based program where we focus on kids. The whole idea is to help kids win at life. But it's parent-based. The parents need to be there. We explain to them what we're doing and why we're doing it. And we have professional coaches that KidStrong trains us on how to deliver the classes in the program to help kids develop from a brain aspect, character aspect, and a physical aspect. So when you take that brain, physical, character development and focus on the kids, that's all we're doing. Well, 2 weeks in, KidStrong had pounded into us so well in the training that we were focusing on the kids. We completely forgot about the parents. And I'm looking around, I'm like, guys, the kids aren't paying the memberships. The parents are. The kids aren't the members. The parents are the members. I wouldn't have seen that if I didn't have my Orange Theory experience. What I still haven't gotten good at, though, is I got my team, I said this to my team, I worked on them. I'm like, you've got to focus on, you need to know all the parents' names. Don't say hi and bye to the kids, say hi and bye to the parents. Kids are part of the product that we win the parents over through this thing, but we can't ignore the kids. It doesn't mean that they're not important, but we've got to win over the parents. They've got to see the value in this thing. It's not an easy thing, just like working out. It's not easy. But that's another thing I learned, right? Is like you're trying to convince people to do something which is challenging for them, because those are the things that are really valuable for them in life, in fitness and in child development. If you take your kids to these things, they're crying when they leave. Those are the ones that we can help the most. It took my team months for them to really get it, because they were so in the weeds and they're just trying to work and trying to like keep the kids happy and build a business. And we were going backwards. And finally they're just like, oh yeah, we got to work on like taking care of the parents. I was like, didn't I just tell you that 4 months ago?
So were you the one that's like, was it obvious to you the whole time that you got to take care of the parents? Or was that something that some of the owners, you guys were talking about things and you're like, hey, this is something that we all need to be thinking about? Or like, when did that really become apparent to you? Or was it always apparent to you?
It became apparent to me when I was watching our classes and watching our delivery of our product in center. And I realized the customer experience was missing something, the member experience. I mean, I feel like I'm the one that saw it, but I've never come up with an original thought. Somebody must have pushed me to see that somehow, but I don't know who it was or where it was. When I was watching it, again, this is my economics training, is I'm just looking at this way. I'm like, where's the value here that we got to present to our families? And that's what I saw. And that's what I was trying to push out to them. So I'm going to take credit for it, but
I'll give you credit for it. Like this was Joe's idea. Just so everyone at KidStrong, all you franchisees, yeah, Chris right. and others know that this is Joe's idea. So you can thank him for that. One of the things that
honestly though, Eric, on this thing, I've had conversations with ownership about this thing and they've changed the programming. And I don't think they never ignored the parents. It was always parent focused and the parents had to be there. It was the way we delivered it, which was the challenge, because you've got 15 kids in a class and you're running it with 2 coaches. It's it's not easy, right? Just like anything else. And I mean, nothing is easy. If everything was easy, everybody would do it, like they always say, right? But they've made tweaks based on conversations that I've had with them and also other owners, because as we've all talked about, we sort of discovered, yeah, this is an important aspect. It's a really important aspect.
Attention franchisors, if you are not bringing in many of the right franchisees, sales are slow. It's stealing too much of your time as a founder trying to award franchises to the right franchisee. There's a better way to do it. That's why I started the Franchise Sales Mentor. If you want to have access to the information, the techniques, the ways that the best franchise sales organizations are awarding franchisees, then you might want to check out the Franchise Sales Mentor. The reasons that franchisors join is because they want access. They want access to my Rolodex. They want access to my connections. They want access to shortcut both short-term and long-term success to increase enterprise value to their brand. I was talking to our mutual friend, Nick, who was at the Shindig, a franchisee with an Attia franchise in Austin. And And he was with a mutual friend on a cruise. And he's like, Eric, and I was coaching Nick. I'm like, hey, you need to understand your customer base more. He's like, things aren't happening. I'm not getting, they're not buying the leasing. They're buying these tires outright. And our model, we make more money if they lease it. I'm like, has your customer base changed from this store to that store? He's like, I don't know. So we need to figure that out. And I said, you need to understand that. And then he was on a cruise with a mutual friend, Adam. Adam's like, let's create a survey now on this. And they created a survey, sent it out to the customers. And he's like, holy cow, my customer base is very different than I thought it was. And so it's impacting how he markets, how he trains his sales team, and all kinds of things. So we have that prompted me to get Adam to come do a session in the mastermind, which I think we're having next week, on surveying your customers to understand how to market to them, how to help them understand the value that if you think it's valuable, do they think it's valuable? Is it really valuable, or they just not understand the value in it? So have you done any surveying or understand the change with your customers?
KidStrong, well, I have it personally. I don't know if KidStrong has, but I think that point that you're saying is exactly spot on. And this is one of the things that we've sort of come around to is KidStrong is solving a problem in the marketplace that we know exists, but the parents don't necessarily know it exists. And I don't need a survey to learn that. And again, I'm not saying that like out of like, oh yeah, I'm so brilliant, but the challenge that we're facing is we get families in there. We know we're helping kids, and we watch it over time, and we see over 6 months or 9 months or a year, a kid that was crying when they showed up the first month and they wouldn't follow any instructions are now leading other kids around the program, and they're just like better kids all around, accomplishing our goal. We know it works, but convincing a parent that works and that they need it, most parents I don't think are in that room. Most parents just want like, I want my kids to have fun, and I'll put them in swim school because I don't want them to drown, or I want them to play sports. But they're not thinking like, oh yeah, I need to work on brain, physical, and character development with my child so that they'll be more successful in kindergarten or 4th grade. And it's that ability that KidStrong is working on to try to get parents to understand and see the value, and especially before they join, so that we can keep our members longer and help the kids be more successful in life. Because that's an authentic thing, is like our goal is we just want kids to be successful. That's all we're trying to do. And but it's hard to do because when a kid shows up and you have, whether it's 8 kids or 15 kids, especially nowadays, I mean, it was really crazy last year, right? Kids hadn't been around other kids. We taught kids for the last 3 years to be afraid of other kids. Now you bring them into a room, you have, 5 kids or 15 kids on one floor, another 5 kids, and there's people moving around and the kids are freaking out. You need us. You need us in your life at KidStrong, because when your child goes back to school, they're going to freak out. Or if they're not in school yet and they're going to kindergarten, they're going to freak out. And you've got to help them. And
so it's not a thing of selling them what they want, which is a time away from their kids and let kids get energy out. It's not selling what they want and give them what they need. It's sell them what they want and then educate them that what they want is really something bigger than that. And that's when you can get a long-term customer. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got to figure out how to give them what they want, and that way they get what they need.
Yep.
And that's really hard, because what they want is, everybody just wants, I'm looking for a play date. I'm looking for something for my kid, like you said, to let them have fun for an hour, and that's it. And what we want to do is like flip it around. You come in for 45 minutes, especially the 3 and younger classes where it's parent-based, where the parents are on the floor with their kids. It gives you an opportunity for 45 minutes to just be connected with your child. Set your phone aside, take the class.
Is testimonials a big thing with this, to share different testimonials and things like anonymous testimonials? Is that one way that you do it? Because you could tell them all the parents everything that they should be doing, but if they hear it from each other, they hear stories about other parents seeing things in their kids. Is that the way that you do it?
That is a big part of what we're doing. We try to get our Google reviews out there for that. When we bring in our guests for our first-time classes, we'll invite people in, like, you know what, you're nervous about joining up. Why don't you come in and watch a class? Again, this is another thing trying to teach my team. Don't let that family come and sit in the corner. You need to have them sit next to another family, introduce the two families. Introduce them, let the existing member explain why they're here to that member. Give them a live testimonial, because that's coming from a member we're trying to sell, and everybody knows that. And if it's coming from a member sitting in the lobby and why they've been there and what they've seen change, then it's very, very valuable. I think that is something that's, I think we've all seen that in every business, right? Everybody knows that. It's just, how do you get it to the people and get it believable?
I think like a newsletter story feature, something like that would be, that way they get it dropped. Current and old customers get that. Something that would just, it's consistently in front of them. Or a magazine from corporate that is a nice magazine that could, share these stories. So they're sitting in the lobby waiting or whatever they're doing. They can just read it.
KidStrong the magazine. I'm sure they'll love that idea.
Nah, it's just more work. Dude. So last topic. Do you have a couple more minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. So, back at Orange Theory, the initial 100 franchisees said, this programming's stupid. You should not do that. We're better at our own programming. If they would have listened to their franchisees, they would not have, you would not have had the programming. And Orange Theory arguably might not be what it is today because of that. KidStrong, there's probably some things that these existing franchisees want to push through. And the corporate office is probably going to be giving pushback, because that happens in about every franchise system ever created. There's people that want to push back. And there's been some amazing things from franchisees that have experience that have made systems much better. And then sometimes they shouldn't listen. So when you hear it framed that way, like, what is the balance? What's the right way for a franchisor or a franchisee to think about system-wide improvement?
That's an interesting way that you frame that question. You got to do it very smartly. Things, I guess, that KidStrong recently implemented was a franchise advisory council. And we have been able to make an impact on the way KidStrong is operating and the decisions it's making. And I think they've recognized that, and they've said that this is useful. I think that's one way, is having an FAC. You have to have a voice that comes through that is clean and clear for the franchisor, because there is that interesting tension between franchisor and franchisee. Everybody, the goals aren't aligned between the two organizations, and you need to have a way to get there. But the other thing is, because they're not aligned, everything that the franchisees want isn't necessarily in the franchisor's best interests or in the franchise's best interests. And you also get a lot of static, right? People are just always complaining because people want to do things their own way, or they want to do things the easy way, and it doesn't fit in. And what we've been able to do at our advisory council with KidStrong is we've been a voice where we can take it, filter it, and it's not just whining and complaining or something random, but we can organize it in a way that is valuable to the franchise to get there. And the other part of it is, we don't necessarily agree with what the franchisor is doing all the time. They can bring it through us, and we can push back on them professionally, or at least it buffers the noise as it comes from the franchisor back to the franchisees. I think that's definitely one way. But it's at the end of the day, I think it's a lot of conversations between those two sides to find a middle ground, and find out why. With Orange Theory, and I think I've talked to a lot of the older franchisors, and when they pushed out
Z's or Zors?
Zors.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, Z's. When they pushed out the template programming, they were protecting their coaches, their head coaches. That's why they pushed back. This was their head coach's thing, that they created the workouts, and they didn't understand that, they're actually making their head coaches' lives better, but they were doing it protecting their own franchise, or they thought they were. And that's the tension there, right? Is you've got to be able to explain things in both directions. Advisory council is definitely one tool that I'm watching work right now. And it's interesting because we got that started now already. And when it started at 35 open units, I think Orange Theory's franchise advisory council started at 300 open units, 400 open units. No, more than that, over 400 open units. It was probably 500 open units. No, I think I was like 20, 17, I think is when they started doing their FACs there.
I like it. I like FACs. I've been a member of an FAC. As a Absor, we encourage FACs. So I like FACs. Because they're either you go into, for so many different reasons. We can get into that at a later date. Any last bits of wisdom? Go ahead.
It is important for both sides of that to realize that they don't know the right answers, and there aren't necessarily right answers for everything as well. There's got to be that humbleness from the franchisor and the franchisee to realize that there's a bigger picture at stake.
I think so, because think about it this way: as a Z, if you are about ready to, if your idea or your thing is about ready to get implemented system wide, you're responsible at some level for that. And has that been tested? Has it, are you ready to make that decision? And so the ZOR has to make that decision all the time. There's consequences to the things that they make. It's easy for us as franchisees to think, oh, we should do this. We should test this. And this works in my studio, and so many different things we think should work and we should be doing as a Z. But the ZOR has to look at it from a different lens. And that's why those advisory councils are so good, because you can get in the room and start to see, why do you think this way? Why don't you want this? Why do you want this? And you're like, oh, it's the coaches. Well, I understand. That's a very valid concern. You don't want to turn off your coaches because they're creative. They are proud of their own programming. The members tell them how great their programming is, but this other thing might be better.
Yeah.
Last bits of wisdom, anything you want to leave the audience with? We got Z's, we got ZORs, we got buyers out there. You've recently just, not recently, in the last couple of years, you went on a long search for your next brand after you had a great exit. So you can talk to buyers or Z's, since you're like in the thick of it right now.
Any bits of wisdom? I don't know. I think
you got lots of them, man. You're always dropping them in the mastermind. Like when you pop in the mastermind, last time we were on, we ended up with 6 of us on a panel. I popped you up and pinned you. And so, cause you were dropping some value on leases and things like that. So don't play humble.
I appreciate that. That's very nice of you. But like I said, I just sort of spew stuff and I forget what I've said right after I said it. So I don't know what I said, but it's very nice of you. I think just what we have to do, nothing's easy, man. It's just all hard work. Everything we go. I mean, you asked me this question before we started, how are things going right now? The last 2.5 years have been very interesting. We keep facing different problems. And I think if anything, what I've learned, and I learned this over and over again, is whatever problem I'm solving today, I will never face again. Mm-hmm. But I do know the skills I learned from my challenges that I face today will teach me how to deal with the problems I face tomorrow. It's just building up that toolbox. Experience in getting old is valuable from that standpoint, because that's what we have to fall back on in order to see how we're going to deal with things in the future. But going back to your crystal ball question, I have no idea what I'm going to come across tomorrow. I just know I've been gifted with the experience to have this knowledge of tricks and ideas and ways to look at things so I can work through a problem and come up with a solution.
Dude, that is well said. I'm so glad that you were able to come on here and share with everyone else. You do it so much in the mastermind, and dude, I miss you. I want to go surfing with you. I want to go skiing with you. So we need to do it. We'll have a meetup within the next few months. So look forward to seeing you face to face sooner than later, buddy.
I'm looking forward to it as well, Eric. Thank you very much for having me on. This has been a great chat.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.